please! Stop! You're scaring me, Vi!
Give me my money, witch!
I'm Jake, 34 years old, and for several years I genuinely believed my relationship was built on mutual respect and partnership. Turns out I was just a walking wallet with feelings attached. I work in healthcare software development in San Diego with solid pay and job security that I'd worked hard to achieve. My girlfriend Michelle was 31 when everything fell apart. We'd been together nearly 3 years after meeting through mutual friends at a networking event downtown. When we first met, Michelle worked marketing for a tech startup, pulled decent money around $70,000 annually, had her own one-bedroom apartment in a nice neighborhood, seemed completely independent, and had her life together. She was outgoing, energetic, fun to be around, had this infectious laugh that made everyone in the room smile. I fell hard and fast. We talked about the future constantly. Marriage within a few years, buying property together somewhere with a yard, starting a family eventually, the whole package. Everything felt right and natural. About 2 years into our relationship, Michelle lost her job. Company-wide budget cuts eliminated her entire department, along with 15 other people. She was devastated, understandably so. That job had defined her identity and given her purpose. She spent the first week after the layoff barely getting out of bed, then rallied and decided to pivot to freelancing. Started doing marketing consulting, social media management for small businesses, content creation for local brands. She hustled constantly, piecing together income from multiple sources. The money was inconsistent, and the stress was visible on her face every day. I supported her emotionally first, listened for hours when she vented about nightmare clients who changed their minds constantly, celebrated enthusiastically when she landed new contracts, reassured her constantly that she'd find stability again soon. But I also started supporting her financially without really tracking it, covered her full rent multiple times when her income dropped below what she needed, paid for groceries more often than not during our shopping trips, picked up the tab for dinners out and utilities when she mentioned falling behind. The little things added up fast. 50 here, 100 there, 300 for this bill, but I didn't mind at all. Relationships are partnerships, right? Sometimes one person needs more support and you provide it because you trust they'd do the same for you if positions were reversed. About 4 months after her layoff, Michelle asked me for a loan. She brought it up hesitantly one evening when we were having dinner at my place. Said she was drowning in bills and didn't know what else to do. Her car needed critical repairs costing $1,500. The transmission was failing, and without it she couldn't get to client meetings. Rent was due in 5 days, and she hadn't landed enough work that month to cover it. Credit card bills were piling up with interest accumulating because she'd been making minimum payments for months. She was stressed and clearly embarrassed asking, but she needed help desperately, and I was the only person she felt comfortable approaching. She asked for $4,000 total, said it would cover everything. The car repairs, rent for the month, and catch up on credit cards so she wouldn't damage her credit score. She promised explicitly and clearly she'd pay me back in full once her tax refund came through, which she expected in about 3 months based on when she'd filed. She'd calculated she should get back around $6,000 based on deductions and overpayment throughout the year. I didn't hesitate even for a second. Told her of course I'd help, that's what partners do for each other. That same night, I transferred $4,000 from my savings account to her checking account through my banking app. Sent her a text afterward saying I'd transferred the money to pay me back when she got her refund, no rush at all, loved her. Her response came immediately, thanking me profusely, promising to repay in full as soon as the refund hit her account, saying I was literally saving her life right now, and she didn't know what she'd do without me. She added a red heart emoji at the end. I felt good about helping her. Felt like I was being a supportive partner during a difficult time in her life. Weeks turned into months. Michelle's freelance work remained inconsistent and unpredictable. Some weeks she'd land 3 clients, other weeks nothing. I continued covering more of her expenses without really keeping score. Then, about 2 months after the loan, she mentioned casually during a phone conversation that her tax refund had arrived in her account. She was excited because it meant some breathing room finally, said it was such a relief to see that deposit. She didn't mention repayment at all. Didn't bring up our agreement, just talked about how stressed she'd been waiting for it. I waited a few days, figuring maybe she needed to handle immediate expenses first, or was planning to bring it up herself. A week passed without a word about it. I brought it up gently one evening when we were watching a movie at her place, asking if now that she'd gotten her refund, we could talk about paying back the loan I'd given her. Michelle's expression shifted instantly from relaxed to defensive. She got tense immediately, said she'd had to use the refund for other critical things that had come up, that she was still drowning in bills she hadn't told me about, that she'd definitely pay me back eventually but couldn't right now because money was still incredibly tight. I said I understood money was difficult, but reminded her she'd specifically promised to repay when the refund came, and that was the agreement we'd made. She got irritated quickly, voice rising slightly, accused me of pressuring her about money when I knew she was struggling, said she didn't appreciate being made to feel guilty when she was already stressed about finances every single day. I dropped it immediately, didn't want to escalate into an actual fight or make her feel worse. But then I started noticing things that didn't add up. When I visited Michelle's apartment over the following weeks, there were new clothes everywhere. Designer jeans, expensive tops, shoes that definitely weren't on sale. For someone claiming financial crisis, this shouldn't have been the priority. I spotted a designer handbag sitting on her counter that I knew cost at least $600 because I'd seen it advertised. She mentioned going out with friends multiple times weekly for dinners and drinks, posting photos on social media of nice restaurants and cocktails. She was spending like someone flush with cash while owing me $4,000 and claiming she was barely surviving financially. The disconnect was obvious and troubling. I was disappointed more than angry at this point. Felt like she was being irresponsible with money while I'd helped her out significantly. I tried bringing up repayment one more time about a month later, approaching it from a different angle by asking if we could set up a payment plan where she paid me back gradually. Again, she got defensive immediately. Again, she accused me of being unsupportive and pressuring her during difficult times, said I was making her feel bad about her financial situation. I let it go again. Started mentally accepting I probably wasn't getting the money back, that it was just gone. Then, about 6 months after the loan, around the time I'd completely given up on repayment, I discovered Michelle was cheating on me. Found out when she left her phone at my place after we'd ordered food together one evening. A notification popped up on the screen while I had it sitting on my coffee table. Clearly not platonic language from someone named Derek. I picked up the phone and opened the message thread, found extensive conversations that left zero doubt about what was happening. Plans to meet up at hotels, references to specific times they'd already been together, intimate photos and videos exchanged between them. I read enough messages to understand completely. They'd been involved at least 6 weeks based on the message history, possibly longer if there were deleted conversations. When Michelle came by the next evening to pick up some things she'd left, I confronted her calmly, told her I'd seen the messages with Derek and knew everything. She didn't deny it or try to make excuses. Instead, she got angry like I'd violated her privacy by looking at her phone without permission. Said our relationship had been dead for months anyway, that she'd needed emotional and physical attention I wasn't providing anymore, that I was too focused on work and never made time for her. I was heartbroken hearing this, but told her clearly we were done. She should collect her belongings from my apartment. She agreed coldly without any emotion. As she started gathering her things from my bedroom and bathroom, I brought up the money. Told her before she left permanently we needed to discuss the $4,000 she owed me. Michelle froze in place, turned slowly with this calculating look on her face like she was running scenarios. Said she didn't have it right now, couldn't pay it immediately. I said I knew she didn't have it all at once, but we needed to establish a payment plan with specific dates. When could she realistically start repaying me? She set down the bag she'd been packing with her toiletries, asked if I was really going to come after her for money right when we were breaking up. If I was really that petty. I said she'd borrowed $4,000 with an explicit promise to repay it. The relationship ending didn't magically erase that debt or make it disappear. Her expression hardened noticeably, said she'd pay when she could manage it financially, told me not to pressure her about it anymore. I said I wasn't trying to pressure her, just asking for a reasonable timeline for repayment so we both knew what to expect. That's when she said something that completely caught me off guard. Said in a quieter voice that I was making her feel unsafe right now. I blinked, genuinely confused, asked what she meant by that. She claimed I was being aggressive about the money, that my tone and body language were making her feel threatened in my apartment. I said as calmly as possible that I was being completely calm and reasonable, just wanted to know when she'd pay back what she'd borrowed from me. She grabbed her bag quickly and headed for the door, saying she needed space from me immediately, that this conversation was making her uncomfortable and she needed to leave. Then, she walked out without another word. I stood there in my empty apartment trying to process what had just happened. The sudden pivot to claiming I made her unsafe felt manipulative and calculated, but I didn't fully understand her angle yet or what she was planning. Over the next week, Michelle moved on with her life quickly, changed her relationship status on social media, started posting photos with Derek openly. After about a month of silence, I brought up repayment again via text message, keeping it simple and direct. Asked if we could please set up a payment plan to handle the $4,000. Her response came quickly, told me to stop maltreating her about money, that she'd pay when she could and I needed to back off. I texted back that I wasn't maltreating her, just asking for repayment of a documented loan she'd agreed to. She replied saying I was pressuring her and it needed to stop immediately. I responded that asking for repayment of money someone legally owes you isn't maltreatment, it's a normal request. No response came. 2 days later, around 8 in the evening, I decided to go to her apartment. Just wanted to talk in person and figure out a reasonable repayment schedule we could both live with. I wasn't angry or aggressive, just wanted resolution and closure on this financial issue. No way was I forfeiting $4,000 to someone who'd cheated on me and was now avoiding responsibility. I drove to her place, parked on the street, walked up to her door and knocked, waited, knocked again louder, could hear movement inside clearly, saw lights on in what I assumed was her bedroom window, called out that I knew she was home, just wanted to talk about the money she owed me. Could she please come to the door so we could have a conversation? Nothing. Complete silence except for the sound of her moving around inside. I knocked once more, said I wasn't leaving until we had this conversation because this needed to be resolved, that she'd borrowed $4,000 and promised repayment. We needed to figure this out, like adults. I saw movement through the window blinds. She was definitely there, definitely hearing every word I was saying, just actively refusing to answer the door. After about 10 minutes of me knocking periodically and asking to talk while she completely ignored me, I gave up and left frustrated but not particularly worried. Figured I'd try another approach, maybe get mutual friends involved or send a formal letter. 3 days later, I was served legal papers at my apartment door. A temporary restraining order filed by Michelle against me. I read through it in complete disbelief, feeling my stomach drop. She claimed I'd been maltreating her for weeks via texts and calls, showing up uninvited at her home, making implied threats about money, making her feel unsafe and afraid. Her written statement described me as aggressive and threatening, said she genuinely feared for her physical safety around me. She'd attached an audio recording from the night I went to her door as evidence. In the recording, you could clearly hear me saying I wasn't leaving until we had this conversation, which, when stripped of all context, sounded vaguely threatening, like I was there to intimidate or damage her. But it was obviously edited. She'd deliberately cut out all the parts where I'd been calm and reasonable, where I'd specified I just wanted to talk about money, made it sound like I was there to intimidate or threaten her, rather than just asking about legitimate debt repayment. The restraining order was temporary, valid until a formal court hearing scheduled in 3 weeks. During that time, I was legally required to stay completely away from her. No contact whatsoever, no going near her home or workplace, no texts, calls, emails, or social media contact of any kind. Violation would mean immediate arrest and criminal charges. The paper made that crystal clear. I sat on my couch holding these legal papers trying to process what was happening. She'd weaponized the legal system against me, used a restraining order meant to protect actual victims of domestic violence or stalking to avoid paying back money she legitimately owed me. My first instinct was pure anger. Wanted to call her immediately, text her, tell her this was completely insane and she knew it. But I stopped myself because that's exactly what she wanted. For me to violate the order so I'd face criminal consequences and she could use that against me. Instead, I forced myself to get strategic and smart about this. First thing I did was gather every single piece of documentation I had about the loan. Found the original text exchange where she'd asked for the money and explicitly promised repayment when her tax refund came. Found the bank transfer receipt showing I'd sent her exactly $4,000 on that specific date. Found her thank you text saying she'd pay me back in full as soon as the refund hit. Found screenshots of later conversations where I'd asked about repayment and she'd been evasive or defensive. Everything organized chronologically in both a digital folder on my computer and printed hard copies in a binder. Then I carefully reviewed all our communications from the past 6 months. Every text message, social media message, email, searching for any possible evidence of threats or maltreatment on my part. There was absolutely nothing. Every single message I'd sent had been calm and reasonable and respectful, asking for repayment, yes, but never once threatening, never aggressive, never anything that could be construed as maltreatment by any reasonable person. The only thing she had was that edited audio recording from the one time I'd gone to her door. Even that, in its full context with everything I'd actually said, was just me asking to have a conversation about money she owed. Next step was hiring an attorney. I researched and found a civil litigation lawyer who specialized specifically in contract disputes and restraining order defense. Met with her that week in her downtown office, showed her all my documentation spread across her conference table. She reviewed everything carefully for about 30 minutes, then told me directly I had a strong case, but needed to exercise extreme caution moving forward. The restraining order, even though it was temporary and clearly based on false claims, was still legally binding and enforceable. If I violated it in any way, even accidentally, I'd be arrested immediately. That would completely destroy my credibility in the hearing. I asked what I should do. She laid it out clearly. Follow the restraining order perfectly down to the letter. Absolutely no contact with Michelle whatsoever for any reason. Block her phone number, email address, all social media accounts. Make it physically impossible to contact her even if I wanted to in a moment of weakness. Let her think she'd won, that she'd successfully silenced me. Meanwhile, we'd be quietly preparing for the hearing, building an airtight case. I followed her advice exactly to the letter. Blocked Michelle's number immediately, blocked her email, blocked her on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, everything. Made it completely impossible to contact her even accidentally. Didn't go anywhere near her apartment or the company where she'd gotten her new marketing job. Didn't ask any of our mutual friends about her or how she was doing. Didn't post anything about the situation on social media that she might see. I disappeared from her life completely and totally as the restraining order required. But I also filed something of my own through proper legal channels. A small claims court case for the $4,000 she owed me. California's small claims court system allows you to sue for up to $10,000. My case was straightforward and simple. She borrowed money from me, explicitly promised to repay it, and hadn't paid a single dollar back. I had written documentation proving all of it. My attorney helped me file all the paperwork correctly. We included every piece of evidence. The texts, the bank transfer, everything. Michelle would be served with official notice of the lawsuit separately from the restraining order. Then I waited patiently for 3 weeks until the restraining order hearing, letting Michelle think she'd successfully shut me up and won. The hearing finally arrived at the county courthouse on a Tuesday morning at 9. Michelle was there with her own attorney, apparently a woman who handled lots of restraining order cases and had a reputation for being aggressive. I was there with my attorney looking professional in a suit. The judge, an older woman, probably in her 60s with gray hair, called the case number and asked Michelle to present her evidence first for why the restraining order should remain in place permanently. Michelle's attorney stood and went first, claimed I'd been maltreating Michelle repeatedly about money for months, that I'd shown up at her home uninvited and refused to leave when asked, made statements that caused her to fear for her physical safety. They played the edited audio recording of me at her door for the judge. The judge listened to it carefully through the courtroom speakers, then asked a direct question. Was there any evidence of actual explicit threats being made? Her attorney fumbled slightly, clearly hadn't expected that question. Said that my behavior and tone constituted maltreatment, that showing up uninvited and refusing to leave was inherently threatening behavior that made her client afraid. The judge asked again more specifically, were there explicit threats of violence or damage made? The attorney responded somewhat weakly that my insistence and refusal to leave created a threatening environment for her client. The judge didn't look impressed at all, but gestured for her to continue. They showed selected text messages where I'd asked about repayment, taken completely out of context to make it look like I was obsessively contacting her about money constantly. But they couldn't show any actual threats anywhere, because I'd never made any, not once. Then it was our turn to present. My attorney stood calmly and presented our case methodically, explained to the judge that this restraining order was being used improperly to avoid repayment of a legitimate debt, that I'd loaned Michelle $4,000 with clear documentation of the loan agreement and her explicit promise to repay. When I asked for repayment through normal channels, she filed this false restraining order specifically to silence me and avoid her financial obligation. My attorney showed the judge all our documentation piece by piece, the original loan request text and promise of repayment, the bank transfer showing $4,000 sent, The full complete text conversation history showing all my requests for repayment had been calm, reasonable, and respectful. Also showed that I'd filed a small claims court case for the debt through proper legal channels, proving this was clearly a financial dispute, not a maltreatment or safety situation. The audio recording provided by the other side is edited and taken out of context, my attorney explained clearly. My client went to her residence one single time to request a conversation about repayment. He knocked on the door and asked to talk. When she didn't answer after 10 minutes, he left peacefully. That's not maltreatment under any legal definition. That's a creditor seeking repayment of a documented debt. The judge reviewed all the materials very carefully, asked to see the full complete text message history which my attorney had printed out in its entirety with dates and timestamps, spent several minutes reading through it quietly. After a while, she addressed both parties directly, asking Michelle specifically if I had ever threatened her with physical damage at any point. Michelle hesitated visibly, clearly uncomfortable, before saying I'd made her feel threatened by my behavior. The judge said firmly that wasn't what she'd asked Michelle again directly if I had explicitly threatened to physically damage her at any time. Michelle admitted quietly that no, I hadn't explicitly said anything like that. The judge asked what exactly had happened when I came to her apartment. Michelle claimed I'd kept asking for money and that I'd asked over 3 times in a single week, which was a lie. She claimed that when I came to her place, I'd refused to leave for a long time. But since she couldn't establish that I'd tried to force entry or actually threatened her in any way, she had no real case. The judge was clearly unimpressed with what she was hearing. She set down all the papers and addressed both parties directly and sternly. Said this court is not the appropriate place to settle financial debts or personal arguments between former partners, that Michelle had borrowed money from me with documented promise to repay, that I had every legal right to seek repayment through proper legal channels, which I'd done by filing a small claims case. She looked directly at Michelle very sternly, said that filing a restraining order to avoid paying a legitimate debt is in misuse of this court's protective measures. These orders exist to protect people from genuine threats of violence or maltreatment, not to be weaponized against creditors seeking repayment of documented loans. The judge reviewed the documents one final time, then delivered her ruling clearly. The temporary restraining order is dissolved, immediately effective now. I was completely free to pursue my small claims case without any restriction. She told Michelle directly that she was fortunate not to be facing sanctions or penalties for filing what appeared to be a frivolous restraining order. Strongly suggested she settle the debt she owed before the small claims hearing date. Then she banged her gavel sharply. Case adjourned. I felt this wave of relief and vindication wash over me completely. Michelle looked absolutely stunned and pale. Her attorney gathered papers very quickly, clearly wanting to get out of there. My attorney turned to me with a slight smile, saying that was a perfect outcome. Now we'd focus entirely on the small claims case. I thanked her genuinely, watched as Michelle and her attorney left the courtroom quickly without making any eye contact with me. 3 weeks later, we had the small claims court hearing with a different judge, a middle-aged man probably in his 50s. I presented my case clearly, showed all the documentation again systematically, the loan agreement via text messages, the bank transfer proof, Michelle's written promise to repay from her tax refund, evidence that she'd actually received the refund months ago and spent it on other things. My attorney wasn't technically required for small claims court, since people usually represent themselves, but she'd coached me thoroughly on how to present everything effectively. Michelle represented herself without an attorney. Her restraining order attorney apparently didn't handle small claims cases. Michelle tried making it emotional and sympathetic, said I was trying to control her financially even after our breakup, that the loan had actually been a gift, not a loan, that I was using the courts to maltreat her further and continue to make her life difficult. The judge cut her off quickly, asked if she had any written evidence whatsoever that this was intended as a gift rather than a loan. She said no, she didn't have anything like that. He asked if she had promised in writing to repay it. She struggled and hesitated, finally said she'd mentioned paying it back when she got her tax refund, but that was just something she'd said. The judge asked directly if she'd received her tax refund. Michelle went quiet. He told her firmly to answer the question. She admitted yes, she'd received it. He asked how much of it she'd paid to me. She said nothing, but tried to explain she'd had other expenses that were more urgent. The judge said firmly that wasn't relevant to whether she owed the debt or not. The evidence clearly and unambiguously showed she'd borrowed $4,000 with a written promise to repay. She'd acknowledged the debt multiple times in writing. She'd received the specific funds she said she'd use for repayment and deliberately chose not to pay anything back. He reviewed all the documents one final time, then delivered his judgment, ruled in my favor completely. Michelle owed me $4,000 plus court filing fees of $75. Total judgment, $4,075. She had exactly 30 days to either pay in full or contact me to arrange a payment plan. Failure to pay or arrange payment would result in wage garnishment or a bank account levy. Another sharp gavel bang. Case closed. I'd won decisively. Michelle left the courtroom very quickly, face completely red, clearly humiliated by the public judgment against her. I felt deeply satisfied. The whole situation had been incredibly stressful and frustrating for months, but justice had been served properly. 30 days passed completely. Michelle didn't pay a single dollar, didn't contact me about establishing any payment plan, just ignored the court judgment entirely, like it didn't exist. So I went back to my attorney, asked what the specific next steps were for actually collecting the money. She explained the enforcement process. I could file for wage garnishment if Michelle was employed, or a bank levy if she had funds in any bank accounts that could be seized. Through some basic research checking her social media accounts, which were still public, I confirmed Michelle had gotten a full-time marketing position at a mid-sized company, no longer doing unstable freelancing. That meant she had regular wages coming in that could be garnished by court order. My attorney filed all the paperwork for wage garnishment with the court. The court reviewed and approved it. The official order was sent directly to Michelle's employer's payroll department with instructions. Starting the following month, a specific portion of Michelle's paycheck, calculated based on California's wage garnishment laws and her income level, would be automatically deducted and sent directly to me until the full judgment plus interest was paid. She'd have absolutely no choice in the matter, no way to avoid it or stop it. Every single payday, she'd watch money automatically leave her account and go directly to me. The system was completely automatic, and she couldn't do anything about it. The garnishment started about 6 weeks after the small claims judgment. I received the first payment via direct deposit from the court system, then another payment the next month, then another after that, like clockwork. At this rate, with her salary level, it would take approximately 18 months to fully repay the entire debt, plus all the court fees and accumulated interest. But I didn't care at all about the timeline. I cared that she was being held accountable, that she'd tried to weaponize the legal system against me and had failed completely. Her restraining order had been dissolved publicly with a judicial warning about filing frivolous claims. She'd lost the small claims case with a public judgment against her in court records. Now she had to watch a portion of every single paycheck go directly to me automatically for the next year and a half. Her entire plan had backfired spectacularly and publicly. I thought about all of this one evening while looking at the latest garnishment payment notification on my phone. Michelle had thought a restraining order would silence me completely, make me too afraid of legal consequences to pursue the debt. Let her walk away from $4,000 she legitimately owed me. But I hadn't broken the order even once. I'd followed it perfectly to the letter, used that time strategically to build my case, gather all evidence, and file my own legal action through proper channels. I'd let her think she'd won, while quietly preparing to completely destroy her strategy. When we finally faced each other in court, the truth was obvious to both judges. She was the one manipulating the system dishonestly. I was the one seeking legitimate resolution to a financial dispute. You don't destroy someone by fighting louder or getting more aggressive. You do it by staying calm, following all the rules perfectly, and letting their own lies collapse under the weight of documented evidence. Michelle's restraining order attempt is now part of permanent public record. Anyone searching her name in the court system database will find it filed and dissolved within weeks as frivolous. The small claims judgment is also permanent public record, documenting that she borrowed money and refused to repay until forced by court order. Her credibility is permanently damaged in any future legal proceedings she might be involved in. The relationship ended badly and painfully. The breakup hurt deeply. Discovering the cheating with Derek was devastating, but at least I got justice for the financial manipulation. At least I didn't let her weaponize courts against me successfully. At least I proved that staying calm and strategic beats emotional retaliation every single time. Looking back now, here's what I learned through this entire experience. Document everything always. Every financial transaction, every promise made, every conversation. You never know when you'll desperately need evidence to protect yourself. Stay calm no matter what. When someone tries to manipulate you, the angrier and more aggressive you get, the more you play directly into their narrative. By staying measured and reasonable, I maintained complete credibility while Michelle's claims fell apart. Follow legal orders perfectly, even when they're completely unjust. The restraining order was based on lies, but violating it would have only hurt me. By obeying it completely, I showed the judge I was the reasonable party while Michelle was being manipulative. Used the system properly instead of fighting against it. I could have tried confronting Michelle directly or pressuring her through mutual friends. Instead, I used small claims court, the proper legal channel for debt collection. Let people's lies destroy themselves naturally. I didn't need to convince judges that Michelle was lying to them. I just needed to present the truth clearly and let them see all the contradictions in her story. Patience wins over anger. It took months from the initial loan to the final garnishment order, but by being patient and strategic, I got a far better outcome than any amount of angry confrontation would have achieved. Some people will try to weaponize anything against you, even systems meant to protect actual victims. The only real defense is to stay clean, stay documented, and let the truth speak for itself. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's just justice, slow, methodical, inevitable justice. And that's exactly what I got in the end.